But is the administration signing off on that? Are they on board for that?
The administration, Jake, wants this to go away. They want it off the front page. They're willing to do anything with it. Whatever Feinberg can do to make this move from the front page, they seem to be willing to go for. As a matter of fact, when they had Carol Browner show up in front of Congress and make the statement that, hey, 3/4 of this is gone, they knew it wasn't gone. Our scientists told them it wasn't gone. They knew they didn't have the documentation. They knew that the science was woefully incomplete. They knew that, but they were so anxious to make this whole thing go away that they were willing to lie to the American public.
Good evening. We're going to begin here tonight in the Gulf of Mexico, specifically with a reality check on just how much of the oil released into the water from that BP Deepwater Horizon well is still there. As you may know, the government's been reporting that only about 25% of the oil from that spill remains. But is that at all accurate? And in plain English, did anybody really think 90 days worth of crude oil was just somehow slowly vanishing?
Our scientists told them it wasn't gone. They knew they didn't have the documentation. They knew that the science was woefully incomplete. They knew that, but they were so anxious to make this whole thing go away that they were willing to lie to the American public.
Our chief environmental affairs correspondent, Ann Thompson, is in Venice, Louisiana for us once again tonight. Ann, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. You know, at the heart, this is a numbers game, and all sides on this issue admit no one knows for sure exactly how much oil is left in the Gulf of Mexico. But tonight, there are clues about where some of it has gone. Pictures of an increasingly blue Gulf seem to support this Obama administration claim 2 weeks ago.
The vast majority of the oil has either evaporated or been burned, skimmed, and recovered from the wellhead or dispersed.
And that leaves, 70 to 79%.
But today, researchers from the University of Georgia say their calculations don't support that conclusion, in part because they claim oil doesn't break down that fast.
The idea that 75% of the oil is gone and is of no further concern to the environment is just absolutely incorrect.
The Georgia group insists more than half the oil spilled, from 2.9 to 3.2 million barrels, is still in the Gulf, far more than the nearly 1.3 million barrels the government estimates. Today, in a statement, the government defended its oil budget, saying it was based on, quote, direct measurements whenever possible and the best available scientific estimates where direct measurements were not possible. So where is the oil? Researchers from the University of South Florida say they found some of it in microscopic droplets underneath the surface and on the floor of the Gulf, in far larger quantities than anticipated and in an area they didn't expect.
We were surprised at how far east the oil had gotten, because this was about 40 miles from the Pensacola area.
Even though you can't see it, the unseen oil is still a threat.
These are all identified.
Researcher Bob Kibler found benzene levels of up to 1,000 times higher than allowed in the mud of Louisiana's Four Bayou Pass, an area that nurtures a variety of living creatures. Things such as?
Such as the small plankton, the small bacteria that are taken up by the oysters, that are taken up by the shrimp, and eventually work their way up the food chain.
And that's what concerns both independent scientists and the government alike, that no matter how you calculate the oil budget, that the true impact of this spill won't be known for years to come. Brian?
And again tonight, there is new research that seems to contradict the government's assessment of just how much oil is still in the water in the Gulf of Mexico after that leak that lasted almost 90 days. Today's report from the respected Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute on Cape Cod says there's a huge plume of dispersed oil deep in the waters of the Gulf that isn't breaking down quickly and still could be there months from now. The Wall Street Journal, by the way, compares it to the size of Manhattan. Today, NOAA's administrator told NBC's Ann Thompson the government's estimate that 74% of the oil is gone is, in her words, being refined, and those numbers are undergoing a very rigorous peer review.
Meanwhile, in a desperate attempt to get the story off the front page, the administration way overstated the amount of oil that's been removed. The first week of August, the White House was pushing a report that said 75% of the oil was gone. How's that possible? But at an Energy Committee hearing yesterday, a top NOAA scientist gave the exact opposite figure.
How much oil was actually discharged into the Gulf?
The best estimate to date would be 4.1 million barrels, plus or minus 10%.
Out of the 4.1 million barrels discharged, how many barrels are still in the Gulf or on its shores in some form?
Probably about 3/4.
So it's 75% that's not gone, not 75% that is gone. That would seem to be a pretty important difference. This testimony coincides with the discovery of a massive oil plume buried deep underwater, near where the deep water rig exploded in the first place. It's 22 miles long, and proof that the dispersed oil didn't just magically disappear or dissolve into the water, as we were led to believe it would. To which I say, of course, it didn't magically disappear. It's an absurd argument in the first place. For more, let me bring in environmental lawyer Mike Papantonio. His firm is leading the class action lawsuits against BP. All right, Mike.
Thank you. How are you?
Good, good. It's good to have you here. So first question is, who is saying, hey, you know what, you can't sue anybody else if you agree to this? Is it BP or is it the government?
Well, no, it's the way the document is put together. And the problem is the way it's put together makes it almost impossible for all practical purposes for anybody to sign off on it. I mean, that is the problem. You can't sign off on something when you know that down the road you have the right, before you go into that agreement, to sue all the defendants. And all the defendants are responsible for what happened here.
So, but is the administration signing off on that? Are they on board for that?
The administration, Jake, wants this to go away. They want it off the front page. They're willing to do anything with it. Whatever Feinberg can do to make this move from the front page, they seem to be willing to go for. As a matter of fact, when they had Carol Browner show up in front of Congress and make the statement that, hey, 3/4 of this is gone, they knew it wasn't gone. Our scientists told them it wasn't gone. They knew they didn't have the documentation. They knew that the science was woefully incomplete. They knew that, but they were so anxious to make this whole thing go away that they were willing to lie to the American public. Think about this, Cenk. Here's where it all ties in. You ask yourself, why would they do that? They did it because they want to add credibility to the idea that this $20 billion is going to be enough to pay for everybody. We know that's not true. We know it's about an $80 billion deal. But if they can make this go away and say all the oil's gone, the 22 miles that you talked about of oil that is 22 miles long, it's 1 mile across, it's 600 feet deep. That's just one of the plumes. And that's another point. That's just one of the plumes we're talking about here. But if the government, if the White House can say, hey, listen, it's not as bad as you thought it was, then all of a sudden it moves away from the front page.